Now that we've discussed NURBS surfaces and some of their components, I want to talk about NURBS curves in more detail. Now, all NURBS surfaces are based on a series of NURBS curves. Now, with a primitive, you're not going to see that. However, you can create your own NURBS curve from scratch or create more than one of them, and thus make your own custom NURBS surface from scratch. So how do you make a NURBS curve? We can go up to Create, up at the top, and go to CV Curve Tool. Once you click CV Curve Tool, you go into a special curve creation mode. So I'll click that. When I do that, my mouse turns into a special X. Now what I can do at this point is click in the View panel, and wherever I click, I'm going to get a vertex. So if I click, move my mouse, click again, and click again, as soon as I have at least 3 vertices, a curve is formed. Now I can continue to click, so I can make the curve even longer and have more vertices if I want to. So click, click, click. And then when you've decided you have enough vertices and the curve is long enough, you can press the Enter key on your keyboard. When you press Enter, the curve is finished. And there's a curve. Now you need at least 3 vertices. I can go back to that tool and create another curve if I want to. Create CV Curve Tool. Now you notice if I say only click twice, I do not have a curve. I have a red line that's actually a hole for that curve, but it's not the curve itself. So I need to click a few more times. So click and click. Now as soon as the curve appears, which is the white line, I can finish it at that point, so I can hit Enter. It just means I have a shorter curve with fewer vertices, but it's still a curve. Now what you can do is take several of these curves, and if you pair them correctly, you can turn them into surfaces. Now I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but we'll do that very soon. In this video, I'm just going to discuss how to manipulate the curves. So once you have a curve, what can you do with it? Well, you can always reselect it, and then show your component types. Now I'm going to use the right mouse key in this case. Right mouse key. So for a curve, you can turn on the vertices by Control Vertex. Here are the vertices. Now much like a NURBS surface, many of the vertices are not sitting on the curve itself. The only ones that are in fact the very first one and the very last one. I'll dolly in closer here. And I'll turn off the grid so you can see that a little bit better. So the first vertex, in fact, has a little hollow box. That's just the origin. That's where you start to draw the curve. The last vertice, which is also on the curve itself, is just a regular looking vertice. In any case, the first and the last one are only 2 that sit directly on the curve. The other ones sit outside the curve. Once you display the vertices, you can move them. I can select one, go into the move mode, and move it. When I move it, the shape of the curve changes. I'm just going to go through and select a few of these one at a time, and then move it. When you're on the Move tool and you just change the selection, the Move tool jumps to the new selection. You can also turn on hulls. In fact, if you do the right mouse key, there's a hull option. And here's your hull. And just like a NURBS surface, the hull runs through the vertices. I can go back up to the status line if I want to and go to Select by Component Type to have more control, so I can activate Vertex and Hull simultaneously. So here we definitely see that the vertices correspond to where the hull is and vice versa. So you can move the entire hull line, but it does in fact move the entire curve, so that's not quite as useful. Really, when it comes to curves, you spend a lot of time manipulating the vertices and not the hulls. Now there is one we have not talked about in terms of components that comes in handy for curves, and that's Edit Point. If I go up to the second filter up here, which is a little circle, I can turn it on. That's Edit Point. I'll turn off my vertex and turn off my hull and just keep edit points. The edit points are special components that do sit exactly on the curve, and they're displayed as tiny little X's. They're a little hard to see, but if I select one, you'll see a little tiny X. And every single edit point sits directly on the curve. So you have these in addition to control points to help define where the curve goes. Now you can move these edit points around if you want. Now if you were to click on the empty area of the curve, you'll see a little yellow dot appears, like down here. That allows you to insert additional edit points. I'll get to that in a second. Right now I'm just selecting the edit points themselves, and to be safe I'm going to draw a box over an edit point to make sure I select it. But edit points are a more direct way to change a shape since they're directly on the curve itself. Now, as I mentioned, if you do click on some empty part of the curve or don't quite click the edit point precisely enough, you'll get a little yellow dot that appears on the empty area of the curve. In fact, if you drag over an empty area, that little dot will move. What that allows you to do is insert additional edit points. So once you get that little dot and then you let go, that's the potential location for a new edit point. Again, if you want that to appear, just click on some empty area of your curve. And as you drag your mouse, you'll see that little dot moves over the curve. Now, right now it's red as I'm clicking and dragging. As I let go, it turns yellow. Now, that's not edit point yet, but I can insert a new one there if I want to. If I want to do that, I need to go up to my Surfaces main menu. Right now I'm on animation, so I'm missing my NURBS tool. So I can go up to this drop-down menu here, change that to Surfaces. And Surfaces will show me the menu set that's designed for NURBS. So I'll go to the NURBS menu set. Now, under that NURBS menu set, there's a drop-down menu just for editing curves. So for instance, I still have that potentially new edit point selected. I can go up to Edit Curves and go down to Insert Knot. These edit points are also called knots. So if I click Insert Knot, I get a brand new edit point right there. If I have more edit points, this means I have more control in terms of defining the shape of that curve. So again, if you want to insert a new edit point, click on the empty area, click drag until you position that potential edit point, let go until it turns yellow, then go up to Edit Curves and go down to Insert Knot. Let's go back to the vertices for a second. I'm going to go back to Control Vertex. Now, if you do insert an additional edit point, a new vertex will be born. It won't be in exactly the same place as the edit point, and they never are unless they're at the very ends, but it will change the number of vertices. Now, one thing you can do is delete vertices. For instance, I can select one and hit delete, and it goes away. When I hit the delete key on the keyboard, that vertex disappears and the curve becomes a little bit more simple. And also the shape changes to reflect the fact that it's now missing a vertex. So you can delete vertices anytime you want to simplify your curve. If you want to insert an additional vertex, the way you do it is go to the edit points, insert an edit point, and in turn the edit point gives you additional vertices. So again, in terms of the filter up here, the first filter is vertex, and the second one is edit point. So as I mentioned, there are a number of tools up here under Edit Curves. Now, one thing you can do with curves is attach two curves together. For instance, I have a curve over here. Now, they're kind of separate right now, so what I can do is move the curve. And once you have a curve, you can move it just like any other object. Now, in order to select that curve, you have to make sure that your object type filter for curve is turned on. And its third filter type here is the curve, so all the other ones can be turned off. But you do need to have the curve filter type activated when you're on Select by Object Type. Once you have that on, you can select a curve like an object and move it around. Or rotate it. In any case, what I can do is position it in such a way that they kind of line up. So what I can do is attach these two curves together if I want to, even though they're two separate objects and there's a gap between them. Go up to Edit Curves, Attach Curves. I'll go to the option box in this case because there's some important options to look at. Option box. Now, the first important option is whether I want to keep originals. If I have Keep Originals checked, I want to have the original two curves left over plus a brand new third combined curve. I don't necessarily want my original curves lying around, so I can turn off Keep Originals. And now I can connect those two curves together by hitting Attach. And now I have a new combined curve. When I do that, it tries to maintain the shape of my original two curves, but in order to get them blended together, it does bend it up here. In that case, it's a brand new curve that was made out of the old two curves. But of course, I still have the ability to move around the vertices or edit points or whatever I want to change the shape. Now you can also detach a curve too. For instance, maybe I want to break this curve into two parts. Now in order to do that, I'm going to have to go back to component type and then turn on edit points. It's something you have to do with edit points visible. Once you have edit points visible, I can pick an edit point, say this one right here, and then go up to edit curves, detach curves. And once again, I want to check my option box. And there's only one option here, and that's keep original. Again, if this is checked on, I'm going to have my original curve, then two new broken curves. So I'll have 3 curves total. In this case, I do not need that checked on, so I'm good to go as is. So I'll go ahead and detach. What happens is the curve is actually detached. Now you don't see it yet because they still line up, but in fact, there's 2 separate objects. I can test that by going back to object mode and picking or selecting. And indeed, there's one curve and there's the other. And they are, in fact, detached where the edit point was. So again, if you want to detach a curve, you have to be in the edit point mode where you can see the edit points. Like here's the edit point right here. And once the edit point is selected, go to Edit Curves, Detach Curves. So that's a couple ways to manipulate curves. You can draw them with the CV Curve tool, move the vertices around, move the edit points around. You can delete vertices if you need to. You can insert additional edit points if you want, and in turn that creates more vertices for you. You can attach 2 different curves together, or detach a curve and break it into pieces. Now we're going to talk about manipulating curves more as we get into some of the modeling.